And this is a very different photo society meeting. You know, usually it's either photos of someone's trip or editing, but this is completely different. So this is but there was a wonderful response from everyone to share what they do. And again, early on, Andrew and I were both confessing, I guess is the word, that we really don't have anything high tech to show, but it's the little things that help. I mean, and I speak for myself. I've got 3 different things, and 2 of them could be found in Home Depot or your local hardware store. So it's nothing special, but it's just something that makes things a little bit easier, makes your camera work easier, saves from having some problems. But anyway, Andrea, how about if you begin, since we've been talking about you?
Yeah.
Reminder?
Yep.
Okay.
No, my pleasure.
Okay.
So let's see. Share screen.
Huh, look at that.
All right. Can everybody see the first slide?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So this is camera modification. I just got to shrink. No, my mouse isn't working. I just want to get rid of the side.
We don't see it unless.
All right, it should work. All right, so camera modification, fixing a split fiber optic cable in the field. So here is my camera. When the fiber optic cable is together, going from the strobe into the camera itself. You can also see there's 2 different ports, but this is a fixed cable as well. But so cables break and they get lost. A few situations I have encountered was entering a tide-dependent dive with very few minutes to spare, and we kicked down. This was in Eastport. We turned the corner, and I noticed my fiber optic cable is split in 2. So we rushed back to shore, and I'll show you what we did. Another time I was on a vacation in Curacao, and the fiber optic cable crumbled, and we couldn't find a cable anywhere near surrounding islands. So again, we sort of went back to the room, and I'll show you what we did. And then another time, this had nothing to do with the cable breaking, but I was tangled up in some seaweed, and the current took away the cable, which led to another good solution. So here you can see the fiber optic cable is broken, is just dangling. And like what Becky was saying, her fiber optic cable wouldn't stay in that little port. I was lucky enough where I was able to come out of the water at Eastport. We took out my dive knife. We cut the jagged edge that was on the fiber optic cable, and we inserted it back into the strobe. And luckily enough, even in the field and cutting it on the rocks with the rushing water, I was able to save the dives. And there's a close-up, made a pretty good clean cut. But that's the key. If you can get, it's difficult to do it on rocks, but if you're at home and you can use a nice sharp knife or an X-Acto blade, it's a lot better. But like I said, in my case, it did work for that particular dive. You can fix an existing cable or make a new fiber optic cable. once they're split or cracked. So for me to fix the existing cable that I had, I needed to keep that plug part with the O-ring and then make a clean cut at home. And then it was a better connection. And then just insert that plug into the strobe part or the camera part.
But you couldn't put it into, oh, I see. Never mind.
Yeah, because I did save. So then in the meantime, when I lost my cable to the tide, one of my buddies had an extra cable that I bought off of her at the shore. So they're fine. Like I said, they're cheap money. You can see my little less than. But the problem I found with those Amazon cables, they might be like $19.99, or you can get the more expensive one, I believe is $25.99. They really don't last. They don't break like the $80 cable, but they must just crack and crumble on the inside because it just won't fire anymore. But what I did when that happened was I cut the little ports off, the little plug part, and then I was able to use them because then I ended up getting a roll of fiber optic cable, and I just made my own.
So now, can I interrupt for a second?
Yep.
So how did you get the new cable into that plug? Did you drill out something?
Well, here it is. So the plug, the cable in the middle was the Amazon cable that I picked up for like $20. You can see that blue O-ring. There's two ports with the blue O-ring. That's what I cut off right there. So the top piece was the Amazon cable, and then the bottom fiber optic cable is like you can buy a big roll of that. So I just used the plug part with the O-ring from the Amazon fiber optic cable. Because otherwise I would have had no way for me to stick that, just a cable into the camera or into the strobe. And then another time, in the beginning, before I bought the Amazon cable, I used a pencil eraser. But what you have to do is that's a little tougher in the field because you need to drill a hole in the pencil eraser. So as you can see in the strobe, I have the eraser, and in this case, I salvaged the $90 cable because I still held on to it. And that, believe it or not, lasted me about 6 years. Just with that old eraser. I mean, I could show you a picture. The eraser is crumbling. But believe it or not, for some reason, it just stayed together. And I'm a firm believer, if it's not broke, don't fix it. So it ended up lasting. And then you can see the part that sticks in the camera flash part. That's like the original part of the cable. So I was able to salvage a piece of one of the cables that I had. And there's just a little close-up of the eraser that lasted like 5 or 6 years of a lot of use too.
That's totally awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it might be a good idea to bring a few pencil erasers with a hole in. Yeah, just as another backup.
Yeah.
So, can I comment real quick, Andy?
Oh, please.
Sure.
So Reef Photo, and I presume all the other ones, they sell those, what's the equivalent of your pencil eraser? And I don't know who makes it. It may be Nauticam.
It is.
Okay, yeah, and then
It
you
is.
just clip it off, and then you can stick in, you know, the the piece that's still good. And then, so that's a way to do it without a pencil eraser, but it's going to be way more, it will be more expensive than a pencil, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, they're $18 for a pair, because I've looked at that route. But I opted to just order another Amazon cable that might last a few months, maybe a year, till that like crumbles on the inside. And then you have those valuable ports that you can use, you know, once you cut them.
Do you know if those Amazon cables, the cheap ones, are they monofilament? I'm suspecting they are based on the price.
I don't know. I don't
So
know
the more-
any technical aspect of
Not the
that.
real glass, is what, if that's what you're asking.
They're what?
No, so the cheap ones are usually monofilament, and then the more expensive ones are usually a lot of filaments. And some of the strobes will not fire very well with the monofilaments if you're using a flash trigger and not using like the Olympus or a compact camera flash, because those have more power and they send out more light. But the multi-filaments may be necessary if you're using a flash trigger with an SLR or something.
Well, I know I've had nothing but good luck with the roll that you buy of just the fiber optic cable.
Yeah.
And that's been twisted and, you know,
So you're using an Olympus TG, right?
yes, TG4.
So that will put out a lot of light. That's not a flash trigger. So you're in a better situation to be able to use a monofilament than people with an SLR. And I've shot both. I mean, I've used the same camera you have. I've used a Sony compact, and now I'm using the Sony A1. And it is more that the flash trigger for that, you need a multi-filament.
Okay. Do you want to continue, Andrea?
Well, that was it. The last, yep.
I have one other quick comment on cutting and splicing, at least those monofilament cheap fiber optics. If you strip the end a little bit with wire strippers and either try to polish it and get as clean a face on the end as you can, or hit it with a lighter to melt a little sort of rounded, shiny blob on the end of it, they'll work a little bit better. If they have sort of a jagged plier kind of cut on them, they struggle more.
Mm.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
Absolutely.
I am sorry, it's Jeff. What I was going to say was recently I bought some components from Backscatter, and one of them included, they have an air lens for the TG6 housing. And when you get that, it comes with a kit, and as part of that kit is a conversion for the fiber optic connectors on the underwater Olympus housing. And they have a set of these rubber plugs that basically are a production of what she did with those erasers, but they are, you know, thick rubber with a hole in the middle, straight hole, that's just thick enough for the bare fiber cable to go in, but tight enough that it's a friction fit. And I don't know if you can buy those separately for Backscatter, but it's certainly included with their that 81-degree air lens. That's the screw add-on for the Olympus, the PTO 59 housing. And I think that is, I mean, I carry those with me all the time when I, you know, is backups just in case something like this happens, including a small cleaver for cutting the fiber optic cable. Because he was right, you need to have a very good clean cut on it for it to work at its best.
Could you send a link maybe, or find out? Because that would be very helpful.
I will look at it and see if I can.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
If I can come up with it, I'll grab a picture and I'll
Sure.
try to put it up.
Yeah.
Hey, Andrea, can you send the
Thanks.
link for the fiber optic cable that you're buying in bulk from Amazon?
Sure. Let me write that down.
All right, well, terrific. Andrea, that was very
Good.
helpful.
Thank you so
Very,
much.
very-
Came in just in time, right, Becky?
This is, yes. I can't
It's very
believe it.
frustrating. Especially when it happens when you least expect it.
Right, right. the
Okay,
best.
so, next, who, is anyone that would like to go now? I know we have Matt and Ellen and Daryl. And is there anyone else whose name I don't have? That has, something that they'd like to share? No?
Andy,
Yeah,
I have a small list of things I carry that's pretty insignificant, but at some point I think that'd be
Okay.
worth mentioning.
all right, we will do, let's do these three and then we'll get your backup list. Okay, so, Matt, would you like to go next?
I was muted, sure, but that was Jim wanted to go first.
No, I think that it's
Oh.
you. Jim is going to.
I'm up, okay. I just need to figure out how to share. This will stop other screen sharing.
Andrea, you should unshare. Yeah, good.
Okay. And I want to share that. Is that up? Okay.
Yep, perfect.
Nope. So hi, everybody, I'm Matt Scheuer. You might see me posting pictures on Facebook as Norman Niles. That's sort of my pen name because Facebook creeps me out. Or Electricity Underwater on Instagram.
That's what.
So I have an obsession with what is perhaps a losing battle of trying to do things with technology in the ocean cheaply, which, you know, I feel like it should be possible to have good camera rigs and ROVs and cool stuff like that without it only being accessible to people who are super rich. But because of the way the ocean is, you know, that's a very hard thing to do. So these are a few of the things that I've done on my camera rigs to try to do a little bit more with less. Not that I have the most basic rig at this point, but I think it punches above its weight for what it is. All right. So the most notable thing about what I shoot with is it's got these giant wooden arms. This one, it's only got one section of the homemade wooden arms on it, but I really like wood as a underwater structural material. It's light, it's strong, it's buoyant.
Could you go
And,
into
it's
to
kinda
slideshow
hilarious.
mode so the picture's bigger?
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. Okay, is that fixed?
No, there's a up on top, there it says after animations, beside it, it says slideshow.
Hold on.
Keep going. Yeah, I see your cursor moving, but
Slideshow. I
no,
wanted to play,
no, just to the, there we go.
oh, play from start here. Okay, that's what I just did from the other mic. Okay, that fixed it.
You might have to reshare the screen of the new slideshow window.
Okay. Yeah, I should know how to do this better.
Yeah, you may not just be sharing the one that's.
Okay, I gotta share the whole desktop. I have my
There you go.
monitors up. That might be what's screwing with it. Okay, so yeah, I shoot with these big, silly wooden arms. And when I say big arms, I mean I can extend them to be 3 feet long a piece. So I can put the strobes 3 feet from the lens or 6 feet from each other, which around here, I mean, it's comical to push that thing around, but if you want to shoot, you know, a wide angle picture of a group of divers or a fish that's not right up or a large section of a wreck, this is the only way to do it in our murky, nasty water. And, you know, adding more length to arms is not that hard or difficult, and you can get shockingly better images out of doing it. The other thing to note about this is I'm using these electrical strobe triggers, like the old Nikonos style, which I don't think he's on, but I bought those from Tom Gately, and they're actually great because they save battery life. The bane of my existence with this is running out of battery. These modern like mirrorless cameras or point and shoots, they use a big screen and they just chew through battery. So or especially if you're doing optical triggered strobes where you're firing the flash every time to trigger your strobes. So if you can run those electrical triggers, they're really great. I've also found them to be more reliable than the optical, at least the cheap fiber optics. The other, okay, this is getting into like more interesting modifications. So this is an external battery that's wedged inside my housing and plugged into the camera. It's a little, like pocket phone charger battery. And this just about adds 2 or 3 times the battery life the camera normally has. So if I'm out like snorkeling with this rig, or doing these like long rebreather dives, this actually allows the camera to last the whole time, which is, or just multiple dives or on cold days, which is huge. That little battery is like $12 with a little USB cord. Not all housings can fit them under there. Like you'd have to measure your housing and see, where there's room to wedge something like that in there. There's different form factors of batteries. On another housing, I actually drilled a hole in it and put a penetrator through with a battery and a little external housing to do the same thing. But most cameras you can charge with a USB plug and an external battery, and that's really awesome. Okay.
Real quick, Matt, there's someone in the chat that was asking what type of camera you use and what that lens was on the housing.
What lens? Okay, it's a Sony Alpha 6500 or A6500. It's a mid-range point and shoot, and it's just a kit lens. It's the 16 to 50 basic mid-range kit lens on there.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah. All right, so okay, I'm a big fan of wet lenses for saving cost. I don't need to talk about that. I think most people know about the wet, wide and macro lenses. I also like to play around with these filters. So color filters, you can pick up non-underwater color filters for just a few bucks on Amazon. And you might think you can do any kind of color correction like that in Photoshop, which usually is true, but underwater, if you use one of these color corrective filters, you can then adjust the camera to be actually letting in more light, and you'll actually pick up more color and more photons that weren't accessible to the camera before, if you use one of these filters. So you can get color back that you couldn't in normal color correction. And actually around here, I found that those magenta purple filters, especially the it's hard to tell in that picture, one is lighter than the other. It's a very mild filter, works the best in our really green water. And then these on the other side, those are like macro filters. They're like these just super crappy wet macro lenses. I mean, they're not even made for wet. They're made for just like video cameras in air. And you can get that kit for like $10, and they don't work that well, but they're better than not having a macro lens. You can stack them up. They're kind of fun to play with. So that's neat. I have no idea what my time is. Trying to go fast here. Okay, this is one of the more extreme things. I love these old strobes. I don't think you can get them anymore. The company was Intova, and then they were also sold under the name Ultramax. They're these like $100 strobes. They just have 4 settings and an optical trigger, and that's it. There's no TTL or anything. So they were dirt cheap and they just worked. And I used those for like 15 years and beat the crap out of them and did all these different things to them. I actually took them all apart, measured all the O-rings and replaced the O-rings in them once. Because they don't sell kits for those. And then the brackets broke off the bottoms. So those white parts that you see are a 3D printed part that I designed to fit around the light and give it a ball joint, and then also places to mount diffusers and guide lights and things, sized to have the fiber optic fit in there. So it's the kind of thing you can do with 3D printing. And if anybody has interest in 3D printing camera stuff, hit me up. I do a lot of printing. I can help you out. I can make parts. I can help you design things. I think it's stupid how much brackets cost. I'm helping my buddy set up just a GoPro video rig that we're going to use for like photogrammetry and other things. $80 for that bent piece of metal is just offensive. So we bent up that thing in the bottom left last week for like maybe $5 or $10 in material, and we're going to make another set of really enormous wooden arms for that. That's in the future. And the other thing I've been playing around with that I haven't done yet, those 45-degree eyepiece things, they're like $1,000. So you can be above the camera and look down into it. And the eyepiece on that is still really small. Like I usually shoot with the viewfinder, or the viewfinder screen, like not the screen, not eyepiece, whatever. But when I have the camera down underneath me, which is most of the time diving, and especially with this thing we're gonna go try to do this spring and go photograph in vernal pools and get pictures of like frog eggs and tadpoles and stuff. You're gonna be like floating on a raft and holding the camera under you because the water's only 4 inches deep. So I'm experimenting with putting either a mirror or a prism on the back of the camera so that you can be above it and look down and see the viewfinder better. Now, this is gonna project an image that's like upside down and backwards, or at least upside down. But that doesn't really matter as long as I can see that I'm kind of lined up with the subject and that the autofocus focuses green. That's going to be kind of a neat hack on that camera rig. And I think
the latest Nauticam 45-degree angle is more like $2,000. So
I've seen. Yeah. So if this gets me, 20% there, so that I'm not just shoving the camera in the sand underneath me and holding the button down and hoping one of them is in focus. It's a cool hack, and eventually I'll make a little 3D printed hinge so that can like flip up and down and out of the way. So yeah.
Good idea. Very good idea.
More to come on that. Yeah, okay. That's my how to do stuff with a point, or with a simple mirrorless camera that you usually need a big fancy SLR rig to do.
Hey Matt, when you had the external battery shoved into the housing, how did you connect that to the cable?
Oh, so the battery has a little micro USB plug, and I just have an extender with like a slim 90-degree that fits in there. If you're gonna do that, the really important thing to know though is that a lot of those batteries will like auto shut off. As in, if there isn't something drawing power, they'll just turn off on you. So you need to find one that's marked as like being constantly on, or having the option to like force it on. Which with those like Chinese crappy batteries, it's kind of hard to tell what's what. You might need to buy a few and try them. But you need one that stays on, or else it won't charge the camera when it's not out of battery.
Okay. So that's not just a regular battery that you slide into the camera. It has a separate plug to it, separate interface.
Hold on, let me go back to that. Hang on. Well, so it's just like one of those hold on, I'm trying to operate this. It's like one of those credit card size format batteries that just happens to fit in there. And actually, you can see in the picture, I had to, oh, come on. Technology, right? I had to shave it down with a knife to get it to actually fit in there and close properly. I think I had to pull a little piece of like some plastic piece. It probably wasn't important out of the housing too. But some housings have a whole big chunky space above the camera for where some other shoe accessory could go, or they're wider and you might be able to fit a different battery in there somewhere else. So it just has a little USB plug that you would plug into your phone, and then that's what this purple thing is. And then this cable is just another cheap cable that I have, because you can't like go straight into the side of the camera. You need the 90-degree.
Yep, yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Pretty
Matt?
creative.
What adhesive are you using for your 45-degree prism?
Oh, so that's to be determined. That's like the latest thing I'm messing with now. I'm kind of reluctant to just adhesive that straight on there. If I do, I'd probably just use like a little bit of hot glue or like, you know, RTV silicone so that I could really easily peel it off if I didn't like it. And the right way to do this is to make a little bracket with a hinge, so that I can fold that down and not have it in the way all the time.
It's a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
That might evolve a little bit more. Maybe I'll figure out a way to not have it project upside down, like a double prism thing or something. I don't know. Yeah.
Sandy, would you mind if I went next? Because I actually have a lot of stuff in common with Matt's presentation.
Sure, absolutely. Okay.
Stop share. Okay. Oh my God, there's a lot in the chat.
Okay, so first of all, let me just go over my camera, since some people were asking what cameras people are using. So the camera I shoot, this is my primary camera, is a Sony A7 R4. It's a 60 megapixel Sony camera. It's a much larger camera, of course, and and I've been using these type of cameras for several years and stuff. This is actually my newest housing for it. It's an iClight housing. I have an iClight strobe, and I have some light and motion solar lights attached to it, which I will discuss. First thing, battery pack. So all my housings have had large battery packs built into them. I'm a rebreather diver, so I don't like to cut my dive because of running out of power. I also like to use the LCD screen with a mirror at times. This battery pack, it was just a bought item, found it on B&H, but the case for it was very thick. So what I did is I removed it from its case, and I basically just got large shrink wrap, electrical shrink wrap, and shrink wrapped it so it fit right in there. This was a battery pack. It was designed for cameras, so it was designed to always be powered on, unlike using a cell phone charger type battery that Matt was talking about. So I'm kind of aware of that. It does provide me about 6 hours of runtime with my monitor running at full brightness, which has been very handy when I was just looking for the monitor, not the viewfinder. And I'll talk a little more about that in a couple of minutes. I tried to look up the model for this battery pack, and of course, this is a bigger battery pack than most people have, space in their cameras to do. I was just lucky that the iClight housing does have a lot of extra space in it, which helps with its buoyancy also. So I just took advantage of that. Another big thing I find, I do a lot of macro around New England, only because you never know if the conditions are going to be good enough to do any wide angle photography. So one thing I've found with doing macro is that's helped me a lot is having a focus light. So I actually have an additional little flexi arm right above my lens where I have a light that can point straight down. Now, of course, having the angle has to be pretty good, otherwise you're just going to be creating backscatter for yourself. But you can see it's very close to the subject. The flexi arms you can actually buy from a lot of different places. They're made by a company called Lockline. You can get the individual segments and the adapters. In this case, iClight actually sells an adapter to plug it directly into a location on top of my housing. But in the past, I've actually 3D printed collars to go around my lens ports, so I could actually mount it right onto my top of my lens ports. The solar light that I'm using does allow me to have variable light, so it does work quite well. So I'm not oversaturating my subject, therefore throwing off my exposure. And of course, as I said before, this is really only good for macro. Very much like that, because I wanted to have a light on my camera also, because I do find the strobes get kind of tedious, and I don't need to run 2 strobes for everything that I'm doing. I wanted to get a light, and I wanted to be able to move the light directly, exactly where I want it to be. So I ended up using the same type of lock line, flexible arms. These are the ones that squeak all over the place when you're trying to move them underwater. They're great, but they're cheap, really cheap, and you can get the adapters. The orange thing you see on the handle is actually a 3D printed part that I made, but since then I found you can actually buy parts that do that, but I just rather 3D print where I can instead of paying ridiculous prices for custom little adapters. Another 3D printed part, and I've been doing this for many of my housings, is having flip down wet lenses. My original one I had actually had both, you could flip down 2 different things, but I found out that I was only really using a super macro wet lens, which is what's shown in the picture here, or a fluorescent photography filter. And I never used them at the same time, so I rebuilt the thing in a much more simplistic one flip down, so that I didn't have to worry about bumping 2 different things or them both going in front of my my lens. But I find it works awesome. Of course, super macro is very hard to use with any type of surge and stuff, but I like having the ability to swap over to that anytime I want. Some of my other lenses I've actually modified to also have the flip down macro capability. So I can get kind of the best of both worlds on my my camera, because you know, one of the issues with, you know, a larger camera is that you have a much smaller depth of field to deal with. So when you use so it means I like to use other lenses that are much better. They have give me a much better depth of field, but then I still want to do macro. So I have the super macro. Okay. Another 3D printed thing, and this is very simple for anyone to even play with this. You've probably heard of a snoot. Snoot basically is a mask for your strobes, so to give you pinpoint illumination of macro subjects. Because it's just a mask, it could easily be 3D printed and placed on any strobe. In this case here, I found a 3D printed model that fit my Icolite strobe, and it basically just screws on, and when I don't need it, it flips away. I used it for maybe a year and a half. And I still use this one ever so often because it's so easy to use. But there are dedicated snoots out there, and once again, it's one of those things you could pay a lot of money for just a piece of plastic. They could be printed, and you also notice that it looks kind of like a funnel. If you can find a funnel that's completely opaque, it might even work as a snoot. Okay, so people were just bringing up these 45-degree viewfinders. Now, as I mentioned before, for years I've run my camera looking with the LCD screen. One of the reasons I have the big battery pack is so I can also use the LCD screen without it sucking up my entire battery. And I would put a mirror right below, on a hinge right below the LCD screen. Unfortunately, I could not find a picture of it because I haven't done it since my last housing. It works great. It did reverse the photo, but it did have the advantage that I could have my camera sitting in the sand or at very awkward orientations and still look at what the camera is seeing. I used it for, I don't know, almost 2 years with using a mirror. And Icolite actually has a mirror that you can easily get that is on a hinge. And it's designed for their transparent housings they have for old camcorders. And it works perfectly attached to the housing with the double stick tape that comes with it for the normal 2 to 2.5 inch LCD panel screens that are on the back of most cameras. So that's what I was using. Unfortunately, I didn't have a good picture of it. Now, the only reason why I have a 45-degree viewfinder now is because when I bought the housing off of eBay, and the guy had used it once in a pool and flooded it. So for about $1,500, I got $3,000 worth of equipment, which came with the 45-degree viewfinder. It's the only reason I have it. I honestly liked the mirror better than the 45-degree viewfinder. The reason is that there's a very small sweet spot in getting your eye looking for that viewfinder to actually see the center of the, because it also magnifies. So I have to say the mirror is probably going to be a better option for most people because it takes a lot to get used to using these viewfinder extensions, and they cost a lot. Last thing I want to bring up, and this is another thing that could easily be 3D printed or they're fairly cheap to get, is control extensions. In this case here, my camera uses what's called back button focus. And this lever that sticks out here, it's very handy to me to have it closer to my thumb when I'm holding the grip, because that literally is what focuses my camera. That focuses the camera, and then the thing in front of it you see is actually my shutter. What this allows me to do with this camera and many new cameras, it allows me to lock in on the subject. So if I hold that down, no matter where the subject moves in my frame, it's going to stay in focus because it basically tracks the item. And a lot of new cameras are doing that. And you'll find that having that control much more accessible and quicker to lock on subjects helps you take better photographs. And there's the quick items. This is a quick and dirty presentation. Any questions?
Pretty impressive, though. Great stuff.
Yep. Like I said, Matt had a lot of the same ideas. You get underwater and you're like, there's a better way of doing this, and it doesn't have to be expensive. I do show a lot of stuff that I bought, but I tried 3D printing those lock line extensions. See if I go back here real quick. These blue lock line, these blue lock line extensions, I tried 3D printing those. They're very hard because the tolerances had to be pretty exact, and the force to pop them in there usually breaks anything that is not a stronger material, such as polycarbonate or something like that. So I do find it much better to purchase those and then just make all the other adapters myself by 3D printing.
Oh, great, though. Very,
It
very
is very easy to 3D print ball joint stuff if you have the ball joint stick arm style.
Well, you mean the clamps and stuff?
Yeah, like the
Yeah, I was going to show that, but I figured that someday we might do a separate 3D printing presentation, because I've 3D printed a lot of my arms and the clamps and stuff like that.
I'd be super into that.
Yeah.
That
gets into materials and stuff like that, and that gets a little technical when you're talking about, if it's better to use, a nylon material, a polycarbonate, or something that's, reinforced.
Yeah. I've been unbelievably far down that rabbit hole for several projects, so I can speak about all sorts of things on that front. I was really interested to hear about your experiences with the mirror, and I'm glad that you like it, because I've never seen anybody else do that. And hearing that it works from somebody who's done it makes me
It
much more
works.
excited to do it.
It's a learning curve, of course, because your image is reversed and stuff. So other than the learning curve, it was the simplicity of it was much nicer than having to get your face down to look for a viewfinder.
Yeah. I've never used one of those like viewfinders, but it must be like almost impossible with a mask and like, especially on open circuit with bubbles and stuff, it seems like awful.
Well, I'm a rebreather diver, which is the reason why the 45-degree sounded interesting, because it allows me to get in close, even though I have that my big bailout rebreather mouthpiece in front of me.
Yeah, right. With a bailout valve, that's equally. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm all in for viewfinder with a mirror.
Yeah. So it's a cheap option. You know, if you want to get your camera down to the sand, it's a good thing to do. I just wish I could have found that photograph. I don't take pictures of my cameras with my cameras very often. It's funny. When I started trying to do this presentation. Okay, go stop.
All right. Well,
Daryl, I have a question. Daryl, are you still here?
Yes.
Yeah, you use the back button focus, right?
Yes.
So what's the advantage over that or the continual focus on the camera?
Well, I mean,
a camera has a continual focus and you can follow a subject with it.
you can follow the subject. The back button focus, it just allows you to lock onto a subject much easier without having to do a half shutter press. And of course, the half shutter press can actually be very hard if you're wearing thicker gloves and stuff.
Right, because often you get a full shutter press.
Yes. So that's one reason why it's handy. But at the point I was making is a lot of cameras are now being built into a lot more AI involved with them.
Right.
And that's where the back button focus comes into play, because once you do that, the cameras, at least my camera, goes into tracking mode, and it actually identifies the subject and keeps it in the frame, locked in on the frame. In other words, you still got to keep the item, the animal in frame, but it maintains the proper focus and exposure no matter where that animal goes in the frame.
And you need to keep the button depressed as well.
You got to keep the button depressed, yes. Another advantage of it, of course, is for the half shutter press is that I can program it to lock my exposures or not lock the focus. So you do get a little more of capability with doing it, but once again, it's a learning curve.
But also, Jim, if I could add one thing, if you have the ability to lock the focus, then if you're working, say, macro, and it's these little squirrely, like say, little shrimp that are constantly moving, this way you can just move the camera in and out.
Yep.
And so you've already locked the focus for more or less that area. Now you can move it in until you see that it's in focus, if your camera does that, and then you can just keep firing, and rather than have your camera and lens combo constantly searching to try and find the focus spot. So
yeah, what's really handy is if you have other things that are waving in front of the lens and stuff, as soon as I lock on, it keeps that one subject in focus. So it allows me to lock on and then worry about composition.
Daryl, there's one more person in the chat that asked about the lens flip adapter. Was that a design you made, or did you find that design?
I found designs online originally for the thing. And I purchased one, I broke it. And then I said, well, I can print this. So I ended up designing my own. So there are companies out there that do make such flip adapters. I know that Backscatter actually sells a couple of them. And they're actually very easy to 3D print. You just have to figure out exactly what the diameter of your lens port is going to be for the thing to fit on. But the other aspect is the threads of where your adapters would screw onto. They're very hard to print. And sometimes you have to actually go to a regular photo store and get is it a 63 millimeter thread? I can't remember. Basically, you would just get a metal threaded item, and you would that fits the adapter, and you would glue it on to the 3D printed part, is what a lot of people do. And like I said, my original one, I had 2 flip downs, but now I found I actually just have 1 flip down now for my because I don't use my flip down lens and my filters at the same time. It's one or the other, typically.
I saw your flip thing has a little retention clip to hold it when it's on the camera. Is that just a friction fit, or is there a clip or a magnet, or how does that work?
It's a little friction flip.
Yeah.
So like a little ball that it pops into.
Okay, terrific. Ellen, would you like to go next?
Sure, mine is, given these other presentations, mine is going to be very plebeian.
Well,
Um,
I'm going to take it another step further after you, so go right ahead.
and in some cases only tangentially related to photography. Last week we were talking about the pointer sticks, and so I just threw these pictures in. The one on the left, I think, is the one that Andy had recommended to us, and then the one on the right is the one that Andy's wife and I got. It is much better. So it's got this nice handle that you can hold onto easily. It actually has markers along here so you can measure things. It goes on your wrist. After you get in the water, you can clip it onto your BC while you're screwing around. Really, really a nice tool to have for a lot of things. Obviously, lobster tail stick. If you're macro diving and you're trying to point to something, you can, or actually anything you want to point to, you don't need to get so close to show somebody something you want to do. You can bang your tank with it if you need to get in touch with somebody. So I recommend those a lot. The next one I'm sure most people have, but if you don't, get a lanyard for your camera. Again, you leave it attached to your BC. This one's nice because it coils up, doesn't get in your way, or you could leave it. And then when you get in, you attach it to the camera and it's just there in case you lose control of it. A reef hook. So if this is a homemade reef hook. So a reef hook, for those of you who might not know, if you're in current and you want to stop, what you do is this is clipped onto your BC, and then the hook, you find a rock, something that this can hook onto. The line there is about 6 feet long. If you're just a lot of times if you're just watching the show, you can inflate your BC, be in the current, not worry about anything, and then you're free to use all of your hands and everything else just to take photographs. This one is homemade. You know, this clip I think everybody recognizes. This hook is a shark fish hook you can get at fish stores in Gloucester, and just file off the shark part and file off the barbed part, and then a regular line here. And this is kind of a cool way to keep the line under control. It's actually crocheting, but you basically make a loop and then pull it through, pull it through, pull it through, pull it through, and it changes that 6 foot line down to something that's about a foot long, and then you can stick it in your BC pocket for when you need it. It's nice to just have it in your BC at all times in case you're in the conditions under which you can use it, which is not that often, but hey, it's small and easy to do there. The next one, my advance is not working. There we go. This is one of my favorite tools since I get seasick very easily. This stuff, most of you may not have heard of it because it's only available in the UK. But it is wonderful. I share it with people, probably, I don't know, 6 to 10 people I've given it to. Nobody's ever had any side effects. Of course, if you go online, you're going to read every side effect in the world. But I find it to be quite effective and no side effects at all. So if you know somebody that's going to be going to the UK or lives in the UK, pick up a couple of packs of these. They're great. It's Stugeron. And I was doing some reading to try to educate myself a little, and the Royal Navy likes these a lot.
And I'm going next week.
And Mary Howard is going next week. So if anybody wants any, have her pick some up. You can also get them in, like you can get them in the Caymans. They're over the counter. You don't need a prescription, but you know, any British outpost, but not Canada and not the US. This is really plebeian, but great. So if anybody's ever, you know, you're particularly if you're on a trip and you have like, you know, 4 wall warts for all your batteries and camera batteries and all that stuff. A regular power strip, you can use every other one. This one actually, the picture doesn't show it, but it has, the other side looks exactly like this. So you can get 4 wall warts on this thing, and the cord is only a foot long. So it's great for travel. And then I do have one legitimate thing here to present, which is flotation. You can obviously buy those little black cubes to stick various places, or you can buy your own closed cell polyurethane and cut it to whatever shape and size you want. The key here is to get the float next to the weight. So particularly with things like strobe arms, you got a heavy strobe out there, you know, yeah, you can put the weight on your housing, but then when your strobe is out there, or if your strobe is forward or backward, suddenly, you know, you're not only dealing with flotation, but you're dealing with a rotation as well. If you put the flotation where the weight is, then that problem goes away. So you can see on this one, the flotations are, you know, out where the weight is there, like this, right on the right next to the strobe. And then this one on the right, that's actually my wet macro, the thing that holds the lens. And so Mike cut this donut shaped thing, which attaches, you know, these screws come out and it lives right on there. So my wet macro lens, which is on a lanyard, is neutral in and of itself. And that's it.
Oh, very good. I have seen those floats on your cameras. They, yeah, it's a very great setup. And the tip of having it right by the actual heavy part makes it easier to hold, and so you're not battling your system.
Right. And you can test all of this. And salt water is slightly different from fresh water, but if you can find a tub big enough to get your rig in, you can, you know, iterate until you get to the flotation that you want. There's some people that like it slightly negative, other people like it slightly positive, whatever you want.
Okay. Jim, did you say you had something you wanted to share with us? I think you had to unmute, Jim.
How's that better?
Perfect.
Yeah, just very briefly, just a couple things I carry with me that I find helpful to have nearby, super glue being one of them. I had a mask split right at the, yeah, right under the nose here. And I was able to cut a piece of the strap off and super glue the split with that little patch over it. And it's going on about 5 years. I suspect that it's still working. So it saved the die. It saved it. I was in Fiji and it saved the trip. You know?
And you still haven't gotten a new mask?
What's that? Yeah, I have.
And you still haven't gotten a new mask?
I have. Probably 2 or 3. You know, I've never had a mask shatter, but that's happened. It can fall. I tossed it to a friend and it fell on the deck of the boat, somehow just beautifully pancaked exactly, and it shattered like your windshield in a car would shatter. It's safety glass. Go figure. That was a $300 item with prescription lenses. So electrical tape, probably many of you already do this. wire ties, very helpful to pull things together, particularly if you have your strobes, and I think Daryl does some of the pictures I've seen, your strobes are connected to the hot shoe. The Icolites all have this, where you don't use a optical cable, but you use an electrical connection, literally from the
Yeah, it's
camera.
a,
Yeah, and electrical ties are very helpful to kind of settle the wires down. And lastly, an extra charger for the batteries. This technology of an extra battery in your case is beyond my comprehension at the moment, because I don't understand how you hook that up. Leave that for the moment. But I've been on a trip where someone's battery charger stopped working, and I happened to have an extra one I could loan them. And they don't take up much space, and they're not a lot of weight. So I find taking an extra battery charger for the camera helpful. And as Matt was mentioning, the batteries don't last very long. I've gotten in the habit of changing it out after, if not after every dive, certainly after 2 dives, I just change it out. I don't even think about it. I just change it out and put a fresh battery in. So that's about it.
Yeah,
No big deal here.
Okay, but you know, listening to what you're just saying, I'm thinking that one of the next not the next meeting, but maybe after that, we could have people share some, at least a segment of the meeting, share what they bring on a trip. I mean, just what you had mentioned, and then Ellen mentioning that very small double-sided power strip. So there are little ideas that will make things easier.
Yeah, I like the power strip.
Yeah. Okay, well, I have pales by by comparison, but let me see what I could. Matt, could you, let's see, share screen. Okay, and view slideshow. Okay, now, as I said earlier, these are things you can get in a hardware store. Whoops, something's to hold things together. Now, this is obviously a solar light, and when I put it on the housing, you will see that you can tighten it down with a ball, the clamp on the ball, but I'm a little extra paranoid. So I put this, it's a wire that you can bend it 1,000,000 times, and I just wrap it around a couple of times, and that's just something to secure just in case if the clamp comes loose. It's an easy thing, and those you can get in any hardware store. So anything that you want to clamp down as an extra or safety or a backup, if you want, that it's certainly, I find it helps. And the other thing, that I shoot with a housing, but this idea can be used with any camera that you have. This is just basically a handle that I had a friend make, and the 2 ends of the handle, of the lower part, that connects to the handles of my housing. So all your camera rig, however you set it up, on those posts that you grab, you can connect something like this. Now, the advantage of this, or the reason for that, is that when I'm in the water and I hand my camera to someone, they know exactly what to grab onto. And that makes it a little bit easier. Now, there's some of the camera systems, they, instead of this kind of a bracket or handle, they use a rope, a knotted rope, but that's just too loose. I mean, from my take, I just don't like that at all. I like this idea of having this, and I, instead of having holes, which would really marry my housing to one particular kind of a handle, rather the other way around, it would make that handle only work with a certain size housing. Now with a slot, the 2 screws that would fit right in here there's certainly a room for flexibility. But also the other big part with this is that when I do a lot of shore diving here, and I can just grab a hold of the handle, and that's it. And it's just like I have a handle on a shopping cart or something. I'm carrying that into the water rather than grabbing the side of my camera or the handles that are on the side of my camera. And if you do that, that means one of your strobes is a good chance that it's going to be banging against the rocks. So this way you're holding the camera upright and less chance that it's going to bang into anything. So those two things are being able to hand it to somebody safely, and the other is just for the shore dives. And the last of these simple things, and real simple, I have a pile of these. Matter of fact, I gave them all to a dive guide on the boat in Cuba because he thought he could use these to hold wires together, some of the cables together. And it's just a simple, cheap thing that you take, and I kind of restrict the movement of the cables. I use them primarily to keep my optical cords, and just so that I'm not putting any extra stress on them, so that
What are they, Andy? Are they
just Velcro? Yeah.
No? Yeah,
So
because that's nice, because I use the wire ties for that, and you're always cutting them off.
yeah, you're always cutting this. You can reuse them. These are, yeah. And this, you can get various lengths so they can hold all sorts of things. But mostly with the optical cord, I stretch it to where I want it to be. And then I know if I'm moving my strobes off to the side, I'm putting additional stress on that. So I anchor one part right to the camera housing, and then the rest will allow for the stretching of the cable. That's the part that goes on the strobe. Again, simple things, but it's just, it makes things a lot easier. And that's it.
The romaine lettuce comes with those wrapped around it.
Oh, this is better though. I tried that. Doesn't hold up. Now and plus you can thread it through, pull it tight, and besides you get a variety of colors. You see, you won't get that with romaine lettuce. Okay, so that's what I have. For next month, somebody the last minute said they could not present. So we do have an opening if anybody has anything that they'd like to share. Could be 10 pictures that you like. Doesn't have to be a formal presentation, but think about it. And if you have something, then you can let Matt or Whitney know.
Are you doing travel kinds of things? Is that photos with a purpose of some sort?
Well, if it's the 10 favorite, they could be any collection from anywhere. And you just, as people have done in the past, say why you like the photograph and what makes it special for you. Doesn't have to be your 10 best, just 10 that you like for whatever reason. So anyway, let us know and we'll plug you in. Okay. Well, this was an unusual meeting tonight, and I think it was pretty successful. I think it was great.